Aloha, how's it? My name is Anne-Marie Kirk. I'm with the Livable Hawaii Kai Hui, where I serve as a cultural advisor. I'm welcoming you to our show on Paikō Ridge. I'm here with Chris Cramer from the Maunalua Fish Pond Heritage Center. How's it, Chris?
Good, good.
We've got some good news to share, right?
Yes, yes.
So Paikō Ridge, let's start with Paikō Ridge. You might be asking yourself, where is Paikō Ridge? Paikō Ridge is in East Oahu, and it's between Kuli'o'o and New Valley, and we have a map to show you. So let's take a look at that map right now, and we can show you exactly where this area that we're talking about is. So if we could see the map, please. So as you can see on the map, that red area is Paikō Ridge. Now, why is it red? Why is it boxed out like that? Well, actually, it's because our community group, the Livable Hawaii Kai Hui, worked with the landowner, Leverett, which is a company based in Chicago. And we worked for many years, and we recently purchased this land and announced it on World Conservation Day, which was July 28th. So if we can go to our next map, please. And then again, that shows you a closer view, so you can see it's 335 acres. So if you look at that map and you look at the parcels, this is a great win for community and a community project that's been going on for years. Thank you for showing us that map. So Chris, you were a part of this project that went on for nearly 15 years. Now, before we get into the deeper cultural parts of Paikō Ridge, and the traditional name, we want to let you all know that this is a project that started for some of us in 2004, 2005, when we first heard about development on that ridge. Do you recall that time?
I sure do, yeah. It was kind of looming above us
Yeah.
that, boy, it's going to be the Hawaii Loa Ridge #2, and
Right.
You know, we had heard stories and over the years of the kupuna that spoke of when the adjacent ridge, Hawaii Loa Ridge, was developed, and what did that really mean? It meant that every time it rained, the Maunalua Bay would turn this red, you know, and just bleed red, and it just covered all the you know, the fishing grounds and just it soaked with silt.
When that development was going on, right?
And so we thought, boy, here we go again. You know, this is history is going to repeat, and so that was a big fear.
Right, and it actually amped up more in 2011, 2012, and that's when the Livable Hawaii Kai Hui really stepped in and started working with the Trust for Public Land, and the first work trying to acquire that property. And for those of you watching out there, this was a real community effort. We had kupuna stepping forward, people that from all walks of life, an architect stepping forward and helping us, an archaeologist who happened to be in the area and helped us. So as that moved forward, we came to a place where we almost were able to acquire it, but that fell through, and those things happened, but our community never gave up, and we continued on. And even through COVID, when we were working with Leverett to find a way to have an answer for us to acquire this ridge, and this ridge became so important to so many of us, and part of it, that importance, is really the mana of Paikō Ridge. I'm saying Paikō Ridge now, but Chris, you want to talk a little bit more about the traditional name? Would you like to start with the winds?
Sure.
So let's take a picture, let's take a look at our next visual, which I think is right here. And this, Chris, can you explain to our audience what this is?
So this is an ancient wind gourd of La'amaumau, and it was said to contain all the winds of Hawaii. And there's an ancient chant that calls out each wind for each locality. And you know, it's amazing that we still have this gourd. It's currently, I believe, in the Iolani Palace, and Kalakaua brought it to the palace. But one of those winds that was called out specifically in relation to this wind gourd was the wind of Maua, and that connects directly to this ridge right here. So it's a neat connection that of an ancient tie, and here
Absolutely.
We are looking at, you know, when we see this ridge, and that ties directly to that ancient chant.
So just want to let the audience know that when Chris and I do work, we do a lot of work together in East Oahu. A lot of times we're gathering knowledge and we're going on this journey of knowledge, right, Chris?
Right.
And so with this particular traditional name, we came across names on maps that weren't Maua. It had a different name. So that's that idea of digging further and really looking at maps and talking to kupuna. Can you tell some of that journey that we were on, Chris?
Yeah, well, we'd looked at some old Bishop Museum reports, and
Right.
they had referenced early maps, and they said Kalapa o Mana and the
Yeah.
ridge of Mana. And when we looked at that original source map, you know, it was really faint writing, and so is that a U or an N?
Yeah.
And then, you know, later, so we thought, okay, this is the correct name is the ridge of Mana, Kalapa o Mana.
Mm-hmm.
And then digging a little further, you know, and more sources come available, and then we saw the name Kalapa o Maua in an ancient chant. And so it's the names evolve as we get more information, but that's the name that we have right now. And
Right.
you know, maybe in the future we'll have more information.
And it's kind of funny, right? Because if we're going to get the name wrong, why not get it mana, right? Which is really
Yeah.
what that ridge is, right? It has so much mana, so much power, and that wind maua that we have there. And we have our other wind in Kuli'o'o. And,
Right.
and what's the name of that one? Can you share that,
So
Chris?
there's a ridge, and it's the tallest peak, and it's Pu'okona, and it says Pu'okona is of Kuli'o'o. It's the wind of Kuli'o'o, and Ma'ua is the wind of Niu. And so when you're out in the ocean, you can see that tallest peak, the Pu'okona, and fishermen would sight off, you know, triangulate their fishing grounds, looking at those tall peaks, and then they might line it up with a coconut tree down on the beach, so you can find your way in the ocean off these ridges and peaks. So.
Well, then think, Chris, this isn't something that we read in a book. You and I were out interviewing kupuna, and we were actually in the ocean right off Paikō talking to one of our kupuna in the area, telling us exactly what you just said, the triangulation and how we look at things. If we can bring back that picture again that was just up on the screen, it is of, again, we're in the ocean looking back towards Kalapa o Maua, or Paikō Ridge. So, Chris, I wanted to ask you more about this name, Paikō Ridge. So we know Kalapa o Maua is a traditional name, but what happens a lot of times is that names change, and it became known as Paikō Ridge. And so when we look at Paikō Ridge, where did that name come from?
So they say Paikō was a whaler that jumped ship, and you know, his descendants were Captain Paikō, and you know, the Paikō line. There's a Paikō Drive right below this ridge, and you know, the last Paikō was Old Man Paikō, and kupuna talk about how he was this mean old man that would carry the shotgun and sick the dogs on the kids of the area. So you had to watch out for Old Man Paikō. And but so that Paikō Ridge is connected to him. And,
right, because it's really Emmanuel Pico,
Right.
who comes from the Azores, from Pico Island, actually. So those of you who know LA, there's Pico Boulevard. So Paikō is a Hawaiianization of Pico. And he gets this property at the time of the Great Mahele, which is 1848. He gets half of that, including the ridge. And people don't realize it actually goes into the ocean as well, right?
Right.
So that's how we get Paikō, and that's how that name gets to be known as Paikō. So in that collection of knowledge, it's also being on the Aina itself. So in 2011 and 2012, when there was a threat of development on that property, we went up there with cultural practitioners, Kaleo Pike and Shad Kane, an architect, Reed Fisher, Aina warriors, as we call them, Elizabeth Riley, Jane Johnson, cultural photographer Jan Beck, and archaeologist Regina Hilo. And you were a part of that as well. And we got to go up there and really see that ridge, Kalapa o Maua, and how it looked throughout Maunalua. And Chris, can you share what that view is when you're up there and why that ridge is so sacred?
well, you're looking out at directly above the fish ponds. So there's Kaneoai Fish Pond, and you would also, you have a view of the whole Maunalua Bay and the great fish ponds of the past, the great fish pond of Maunalua, and so these are significant works of in kahiko days where they would build these massive monuments out into the ocean, and you can really see that from up on the ridge.
Right, and then as we're up there, one of the things that became very apparent was what we believe to be probably the last moku boundary wall intact in the islands. And I think we have a picture of it we want to share with you so our viewers can see it. So this is that wall. At some points, it's 4 feet high and 4 feet wide, which is similar to we see other traditional Hawaiian dry stack pohaku walls. And this is the wall again. So as we're looking at the wall and getting information, one of the things we learned through our archaeologists is that there's little quarries on the side of these walls, and it was where a pohoihoi would be, and then our kupuna would have large rocks, drop them, they would crack the lava and create almost these bricks that they would use to stack them. And it's just an amazing accomplishment. As Shad Khani said, the amount of people it would have taken to build this would have been enormous.
Gosh.
And we look at a moku boundary. Can you explain what mokus are and how we look at them, Chris? Are you comfortable with that?
Well, there's old maps that show Pu'okona as a boundary, and so it's kind of, I'm not 100% sure, where that ancient boundary was, but this would, when you look on maps, you see these long stone walls that, and they're really defining those boundaries, and this is something that's still there today. You can see it all the way from the spine of the ridge all the way down to the shoreline.
Right. So, and it's an amazing thing to see and to have photos of. And, sometimes we've had people go, well, this is a cattle wall, or this, and it's like, no.
Mm-hmm. Right. No one's building cattle walls way up on the top of the mountain.
So, we know, and we're going to study it. We want to know more about it. We also know that up there we have Elapaya. We want to do a dryland forest up there. So all of these things we were dreaming about in 2011, 2012 actually became a reality as the Hui acquired this property. So what else do you think is important for people to know of Kalapa'ō Paikō Ridge?
Well, just going back to the wall itself, there's a resurgence in Hawaii right now of Hawaiian dry stack wall building, Uhau Humu Pohaku, and it's like Tetris and fitting all these stones together and locking them, and to think that they've lasted for these walls for centuries is really amazing. But there's a resurgence now with in Waimanalo, they're rebuilding and really leading the way right now with Pahonu Fish Pond, and to think we have this right here in the community.
So when we look at the dry stack wall, we look at the cultural treasures that are up there, and now we can look at it as a way of learning more about what was happening. I'd like to go to the next slide, please, and it's one of Paikō, again, that we're looking towards Leahi, and there's that wall there, and then we see Leahi or Diamond Head to our right, and if you're looking the other way, I'm sorry we don't have a picture of it, but you would see what was once the largest fish pond in all of Hawaii, Loko'ia o Maunalua, that was 523 acres. But what we wanted to talk about is also the way that we look at a resource, because we have our cultural resource, but we have our natural resource. Can you talk about the importance of the ridge itself and where it leads down to and what's below it and the water that comes?
Well, one thing that stuck with me was the words of Uncle Henry Cheng Wo, and he was in Ewa and working with the limo. He was a master of limo, the seaweed, and all the knowledge that was passed down to him through his family. And with that, he really stressed how vital taking care of our water is, and that was a message that he spread, in communities across Hawaii. And if I remember correctly, he talked about following that one raindrop, the first one that is when it hits the mountain, and following it all the way down. Yeah. And as it goes through the lava tubes and through the different, all the way down, and you want to protect that water so it doesn't get dirty or polluted or disrupted. And you keep it all the way down to the shoreline, and that's where the mountain gives birth to the ocean, and where the vai meets the kai.
Right, and I was hoping we have that picture. There's a picture from the ocean looking back at the ridge. If we have it, if we can bring it up. There we go. That's the picture we wanted to see. Thank you. So if you look at the ridge, so the ridge is on your left. That's Paikō Ridge. You'll see two open spaces with no development. On the right is Maunalua, and that's between Kuleo and Ka'alake Valley. So if you look at this, you see Paikō Lagoon below, and behind that would be Kaniwai Fish Pond and Kaniwai Springs. So that cloud that's in the back that has rain coming down, that comes all the way out to where you're at, correct? Mm-hmm. So that journey.
Right.
So how have you seen the water as you're working out and the fish pond, and knowing now that the ridge is going to be saved? How do you look towards the future?
Well, right now we watch the clouds come in, and when they hit that heat, of the highway and all that, they don't drop rain. They go up to the top of the ko'olaus, and if we can reforest that ridge, we can bring back the rain and have it drop rain, which we don't get right now because it's too hot with all the invasive vegetation that's there currently. So.
Right. So and that's part of the Hui's plan. It has always been protecting our cultural resources, and then helping to have our natural resources thrive again up there, because everyone benefits from it below. People don't realize it, but all of it is touched by that important water.
Right. There's an ancient, expression, or it's in an old chant, talking about how the rain feeds the fish of Maunalua, and it's that connection with, bringing life to the fish of Maunalua from the rain. So if we don't have that rain, we don't have that life for our fish.
And another really important thing at the tip of the ridge as it goes down before we get to the spring and the fish pond, and we have Kalauha'i to our right, which is on the other side of the ridge. Before I get to that, I want to ask you, our kupuna looked at these ridges and where the water is, and it was important to them to put a fish pond there. Can you talk about how our kupuna looked? So as we have Kalapa'omaua, Paikō Ridge, feeding into two fish ponds, Kaniwai and Kalauha'i.
So each of these ridge spurs is really a conductor of water, and it's flowing down. We can't see it all the time, but it's flowing down through underground lava tubes, and so all this water is flowing through these tunnels, and right at the ridge spur, at the point of the ridge, is where it comes up, and it's under pressure. It's artesian, so that means there's a lot of pressure, and it comes forth right up, and that's the exact place where Hawaiians would make their local their fish pond, right where those freshwater springs come up, because it's naturally going to recruit all the fish from the ocean.
So it's kind of strange because you're going down Kalaniaʻanole Highway and you're actually driving over this path of water that's beneath you, right? These lava tubes that feed into these areas. Yeah. The other thing that's really important about that bluff there, looking towards Maunalua at the front of Kalapa'omaua, is a really important place called the Kuleo Bluff Shelter. Can you share a little bit about the Kuleo Bluff Shelter?
Sure. So these shelters are, some of them were like workshops, and what was found in the 1950s when they were doing some of the first radiocarbon dating, and so they were able to say, well, this is when settlement first came to Hawaii, and this is how so the science was catching up to the mo'olelo. And they also found ancient tattoo needles and all the different shells and things from the ocean and from the land that were modified for that world back then. So it's kind of amazing to me when I saw all these marine shells, right at the shelter entrance, and thinking not only how abundant it was, but the knowledge that you had to have to modify everything around you.
Right.
It's not like today where we buy things, but you had to modify everything that's around you
No, you're totally right, because when that work happened, it was in the 1950s, and there was a thought that that time Hawaiians came here between the 13th and 15th century, and that Kuleo Bluff shelter just kind of turned everything over, because now they were off by, they think, 300 to 500 years, which would have brought us back to like 900 AD. But we know our mo'olelo, as you said, go back further, but this reinforces what's going on in our community. And I think it's really important to point out that if you're on Kalanianole Highway and you go by Kaniwai Spring, there's a gate in front. And can you tell them what's on the gate?
Sure. So on the front of the gate is the Ohe Kapala print, and those are the motif or the print that they would use for kapa making. And so that's proudly right on the front for everyone to appreciate when when they pass by, and that came directly from up above in the shelters at Kuleo'o.
So when we look and we learn about Kuleo Bluff Shelter, we're learning more about Paikō Ridge Kalapa'omaua. It seems like the work that you and I do is the work that's happening there, which it's getting knowledge and then constructing that knowledge and building a story, right? So where do you see this story going in the future for Paikō Ridge?
Well, it was a big puka in our community to have, this hundreds of acres, and it was owned offshore, and we had no access and no way to steward that. So I think having community stewardship for the first time in generations is going to be really exciting, and that we can change the course of our community because we have stewardship of our resources. So that hasn't happened before. Right.
And I think, can you, I know I want to speak to it, but I won't. I'll let you do it. The idea that this acquisition of this 323 acres, what it does to other communities in their struggles to protect their sites as an inspiration to them.
Sure. I think that, seeing the successes over the years, and this is a big one for the community, but across Hawaii, that we all communities can look to where those sites are that are really significant for those communities. And I think of, in particular, the vai lands, so the water producing lands, because those were, since Kahiko days, those were always the most significant and treasured lands. And Paikō Ridge or Kalapa'omaua, behind it is the drinking water spring of Elelupe. So, when we're talking about protecting the ridge, we're also talking about protecting the fresh water, and drinking water. And so all communities need to have stewardship of their drinking water and their water sources. We can't have that controlled or owned somewhere else. That's not a good plan for success for our communities.
I agree with you, and here we have this, what has happened out in East Oahu, Paikō Ridge, Kalapa'omaua, and again, it was community driven, but at the same time, I have to say, when we do these type of projects, and I know Chris will agree, that we always know kupuna are with us. We can always feel their presence, and there were times when we thought we didn't know if this was going to happen, if we were going to be able to acquire it. And we just all came together from all different walks of life with one goal. What is the Aina telling us? And the Aina was telling us it needed our help. So I wanted to take a quick look now at some video of the ridge, and we'll look at it from the ocean up until the ridge top. So if we could roll that video, please. So that video really demonstrates from the ocean up to the beginning of Kalapa'omawa to the end of it, 335 acres that the community was able to acquire. You shake your head, speechless. We're all kind of, the day that it happened and it was announced in our community, so many people were blown away that this happened. There's a quote I always like to say, it's by Yeats, and dreams begin responsibility. So we dreamed it, it happened, and now we have to be responsible to that dream. And I want to take another look again at Kalapa'omawa, Paikō Ridge, and the beauty of it, and the fact that our community can breathe. This is breathing room, right, for our kupuna,
future.
For our future. This is a generational gift that comes from our community to future generations, but not only from our community, but from all those kupuna 1,000 years before us. So, Chris, any last words?
Look forward to seeing things unfold as, it's been so long, and I want to thank everybody that was a part of it, and yourself and the Hui and all the families in the valley, and it was really
great. And for all of you out there, if you're interested in learning how you can be involved with Kalapa'omawa and learn more about Paikō Ridge, you can contact the Livable Hawaii Kai Hui. Thank you so much for spending your time with us on Maunalua, past, present, and future. And please watch for upcoming shows about all the exciting things happening out in East Oahu. Thank you so much. Aloha.